I missed spending my mom's last Christmas with her because my girlfriend threw a tantrum over a $15 gift. But later, I found out she was using me for rent, and I exposed her at a party. My girlfriend flipped out because I bought my mom a $15 brooch for Christmas and hadn't gotten her anything yet. I stayed home instead of visiting my mom like I always do. My mom passed away 2 days later. Turns out, my girlfriend had been using me to cover her rent and expenses while pretending to be an entrepreneur. I exposed her at a New Year's Eve party, and everything unraveled. I still carry the guilt, but I finally found closure. You got your mom a gift, but not me? Mallory was standing in the kitchen holding the small wrapped box I had left on my dresser. Her voice had that sharp edge she used when she was already halfway down the spiral. I told you we were exchanging gifts after Christmas, I said, trying to keep my tone even. I'm seeing her for the holiday. You didn't want to come. She didn't reply. Just stared at me like I'd committed some unthinkable betrayal. That was 2 days before Christmas. I didn't know it then, but that was the last time I'd get a chance to see my mom. I gave that up to stay and comfort someone who, as I later found out, didn't care about me at all. When Mallory and I met at a friend's summer cookout in Madison, she came across as warm, vibrant, and driven. She talked a lot about her brand, how she wanted to start a lifestyle business that focused on wellness and aesthetics. She was living in a shared house back then, working part-time at a boutique, and occasionally posting polished lifestyle photos on Instagram. I wasn't looking for anything serious, but she had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. Our first few dates were late-night walks along Lake Mendota, sharing tacos from food trucks, and listening to her dream out loud about her future. It was intoxicating. She made me feel like I was part of something bigger. 3 months in, she mentioned her lease was ending, her roommate was moving in with her boyfriend, and she didn't have a plan yet. I offered for her to move into my apartment in Milwaukee. It was early, sure, but it felt like the right move. At first, it was fine. She'd cook sometimes, we'd have movie nights, and she always found a way to make our small place feel cozy. But slowly, things started shifting. She picked up fewer shifts at the boutique. Started spending more time at home. When I asked about rent, she'd say she was between opportunities or investing in herself. I was covering everything: utilities, groceries, her gym membership. She even borrowed my credit card a few times when her brand expenses came up unexpectedly. I told myself it was temporary. That she just needed time to get her footing. Love is about support, right? When December rolled around, I told Mallory, like I had months earlier, that I'd be going to La Crosse to spend Christmas Eve and day with my mom. It was our tradition. I'd done it every year since the divorce, and my mom always looked forward to it. We'd cook together, play records, and drink mulled wine by the tree. It was simple but sacred. Mallory acted distant when I brought it up again. I figured it was the stress of the holidays. I reassured her that we'd celebrate together when I got back, even suggested we plan something just for us on New Year's Eve. She nodded but didn't say much. 2 days before Christmas, I picked up a small brooch I found online for my mom. It reminded me of one she had back when I was a kid, silver with tiny blue stones, shaped like a snowflake. I wrapped it up and set it on the dresser. Mallory saw it while I was packing. You got your mom a gift, but not me, she asked. Her voice was tight, eyes hard. I reminded her we had agreed to exchange gifts after Christmas. That I was seeing my mom first and didn't want to leave empty-handed. That didn't seem to matter. She didn't talk to me the rest of the evening. Went out with friends and came home late. The next morning, she was cold and withdrawn, saying she didn't feel prioritized and accusing me of putting my old family before the new one. I reminded her that she said she didn't want to drive in the snow. That she didn't like small-town holidays. Still, she cried. Said she felt unloved. That she couldn't believe I was abandoning her for Christmas. I should have left. I should have gotten in the car, driven the 3 hours to my mom, and kept our tradition alive. But I didn't. I stayed. Christmas Day was miserable. She barely acknowledged me. Didn't touch the breakfast I made. Sat on the couch watching feel-good Hallmark movies while scrolling through her phone. We didn't open anything. She didn't say thank you or I love you. Just silence and coldness. On the 27th, I got a call from my sister. Mom had passed away in her sleep. The coroner said it was a heart attack. Peaceful. Suddenly. Unexpectedly. I hadn't seen her. Hadn't hugged her. Hadn't given her the gift. The guilt didn't hit me all at once. It crept in like slow poison. At first, I was just numb. Mallory said all the right things, she was so sorry, couldn't believe it, asked if she could come to the funeral. I said no. But a week later, it was like it had never happened. She was back to buying things, planning her next business launch, and asking why I wasn't being affectionate. That's when I started noticing everything. Receipts for things I never saw. Charges on my card for appointments, lunches, spa treatments. Conversations she had with friends on speakerphone that didn't add up. I checked her email one day, something I'd never done before, and saw messages about being late on payments to her last landlord, how she had landed on her feet with a generous guy who's footing the bills for now. My stomach turned. I reached out to someone I vaguely remembered, Corey, her ex, whom she always described as controlling and toxic. We had a mutual friend who connected us. Corey confirmed everything. He said she'd moved in with him under the same circumstances, temporary, convenient, and slowly stopped contributing to anything. Said she made him feel guilty every time he brought up money. She eventually left when he cut her off. The puzzle pieces clicked. The tears. The guilt-tripping. The self-centered worldview. It wasn't love. It wasn't even confusing. It was a strategy. And I had played right into it. I didn't confront her right away. Part of me wanted to. Desperately. But the larger part, the one that had already been burned, wanted to be sure. Wanted to watch just a little longer, to see if any of what she did could possibly be chalked up to ignorance or immaturity. But it only got worse. In the weeks after my mom passed, I was barely holding myself together. Grief is a strange thing, it doesn't always look like crying. Sometimes, it looks like sitting on the couch for hours, staring at the same mug of coffee until it's cold. Sometimes it looks like going through your day on autopilot, nodding in conversations you aren't part of anymore. Mallory noticed. Of course she did. But not in the way someone who loves you would. Instead of offering comfort or support, she began asking me why I was so distant, if I was still mad about Christmas, and whether I was ever going to be fun again. She even asked if I was depressed because the holidays were over. I didn't respond. I didn't have the energy. At one point she literally stepped over a box of my mom's belongings, keepsakes my sister and I had packed up after the funeral, and asked if I wanted to go to a wellness retreat with her in Lake Geneva. Her treat. With my card. It was then that I knew. Not just suspected, but knew. There was no empathy. No depth. No awareness of how deeply she'd cut me. She hadn't just manipulated me into missing Christmas with my mom, she made it about herself. And now she was using my grief as a backdrop for her lifestyle. That's when I decided I needed to do something. New Year's Eve was coming up, and one of our mutual friends, Angela, was throwing a party. A swanky downtown loft affair. Dress code, champagne tower, photo booth, the whole thing. Mallory was ecstatic. She spent days planning her outfit, booked a nail appointment, and ordered a new dress online. I heard her on the phone with one of her influencer friends saying she wanted a night to make the feed pop. I stayed quiet, but I started making calls. I spoke to Angela. I told her what was going on. Told her everything, how Mallory hadn't paid rent in months, had manipulated me out of seeing my mom for Christmas, and was now treating my grief like an inconvenience. Angela was stunned. Said she had no idea. Said she'd noticed Mallory was off, but hadn't known how bad it was. Angela promised me she wouldn't say anything, but that if the opportunity presented itself, she'd back me up. I didn't want drama. I wasn't looking to cause a scene for fun. But I needed the truth out there. I needed people to see who Mallory really was, not the curated version she posted online. And maybe, selfishly, I needed to reclaim some part of my dignity. The night of the party, Mallory was radiant, physically, anyway. Sequin dress, flawless makeup, heels that clicked like punctuation on the hardwood floors. She was glowing, but not in a way that made me feel proud. It was the kind of glow that comes from feeding off other people's energy. She soaked up every compliment, every camera flash. I stayed mostly quiet that night, sipping ginger ale and watching. I felt like an observer in my own relationship, like a guest at a wedding I didn't RSVP to. Around 10:30, just before the countdown would start, Angela tapped her glass and said a few words. Thanks everyone for coming. Toasted to love and growth and whatever else people say at New Year's parties. Then she handed the mic to me. I hadn't expected that part. My heart pounded, but I stood. I could feel Mallory watching me, already halfway to fake smiling, anticipating a sweet shout-out or maybe even a proposal. Instead, I said this: I just want to say thanks to the people who've shown up for me this year. It's been a hard one. I lost someone really important to me, my mom, right after Christmas. I missed spending her last holiday with her because I stayed home. And I stayed home for the wrong reasons. There was a beat of silence. A few people murmured. I've learned a lot this year about love. About how love isn't guilt trips or silent treatments. It's not gaslighting or manipulation. And it's definitely not living rent-free while someone else pays your bills under the illusion of support. A few heads turned. Mallory's eyes narrowed. I didn't say her name, but I didn't need to. Angela raised her glass and quietly added, "We stand accountable." That broke the tension. Some people chuckled awkwardly. Mallory just stood there, blinking, frozen like someone had pressed pause on her. She didn't say anything. She grabbed her purse and left. The aftermath was messy but quiet. She texted me the next morning, a long paragraph about how humiliated she was, how I blindsided her, how I had ruined her brand. Said she couldn't believe I'd air private matters in public. I didn't reply. She came back to the apartment a few days later to grab her things. Packed in silence. Left a few snide sticky notes, passive-aggressive jabs about how I'd regret this and how no one else would tolerate my moods. I threw them out with the dried-up Christmas tree. After she left, the apartment felt both empty and lighter. Not the kind of quiet that wraps around you like a blanket, but the kind that lets your shoulders drop, like you didn't even realize you were carrying something until it was gone. It was like I had space again, not just physically, but in my head. The tension that had built up over the last several months had finally started to unravel. Still, there was no comfort in the quiet. Just grief. With Mallory gone, I had no distractions left. I had to face the thing I'd been trying not to think about. I missed my mom's last Christmas because I stayed for someone who had no intention of ever showing up for me. I spent the first week of January cleaning. That's what I do when things feel like they're falling apart. I organize. I put Mallory's leftovers in a box and taped it shut. I didn't care if she ever came to get it. I went through drawers, wiped down cabinets, took the batteries out of the remote and put in new ones like that would somehow reset everything. Then I finally opened the box my sister had sent me after the funeral. She had driven down to La Crosse the day after I got the call and packed up some of our mom's keepsakes, the stuff she knew I'd want. I'd been avoiding it. Couldn't bear the idea of holding something that still smelled like her. But I opened it. Inside were old photos, a scarf I remembered from childhood, and a worn-out recipe book with her notes scribbled in the margins. Tucked into one of the pages was a picture I hadn't seen in decades, me, maybe 9 or 10 years old, holding up an ornament while standing beside the Christmas tree. My mom was next to me, wearing a fuzzy sweater and smiling that small, warm smile she always wore when we were just being. I stared at the photo for a long time. That was the same year she'd worn the original brooch, the one I tried to replace this past Christmas. The one I had left wrapped on my dresser while I sat through a silent, performative holiday with Mallory. And just like that, the guilt came rushing back. Crushing, suffocating guilt. I should have been there. I should have told Mallory no. That this was important. That my mom came first. But I didn't. I chose peace. I chose not to fight. I chose to keep the relationship afloat instead of doing what I knew was right. And now it was too late. The funny thing is, once you get past the initial crash, grief becomes quieter. But it never really leaves. It becomes a low hum in your life, something you carry around. You can still laugh, still go to work, still run errands, but it's always there. Especially when there are reminders. That winter, everything reminded me of her. The grocery store aisles lined with peppermint bark and cinnamon candles. The sight of someone wearing a coat like hers. The snow falling just right, the same way it used to in La Crosse when we'd sit on the porch and watch it settle on the trees. I started going to therapy not long after. I'd never been before. The idea of it always felt unnecessary. But now? Now it was survival. The first few sessions were BR-tal. I didn't cry in front of the therapist, but I left each appointment feeling like I'd been wrung out and hung up to dry. We talked about grief, of course. About regret. But also about patterns, about why I stayed with someone like Mallory in the first place. About why I had ignored red flags that now seemed obvious in hindsight. The answer wasn't simple. It never is. I think part of me wanted to feel chosen. After the divorce, I spent years trying to be the easy one, the son who didn't cause trouble, the partner who compromised. I thought that if I gave enough, cared enough, didn't ask for too much, people would stay. Mallory didn't stay. And my mom, the one who always had, was gone. So I started over. Not in some dramatic way. There was no grand reinvention, no eat pray love journey. But I started doing little things. I made my mom's pecan pie recipe in February, just to see if I could. I picked up my guitar again. I even went through and unsubscribed from every influencer Mallory used to follow, cleared her photos off my phone, deleted the shared album we had from our content trips to Door County. And I talked. A lot. To my sister. To my therapist. To Angela, who became a surprising source of comfort after the party. Turns out she had always suspected something was off with Mallory but didn't want to interfere. We ended up getting drinks a few weeks after everything blew up. She said something that stuck with me: "You didn't ruin anything, Travis. She was already ruining it. You just stopped helping her hide it." That hit me. Because for the longest time, I thought I was the one who had destroyed the relationship. That by standing up for myself, I had caused the collapse. But in reality, I had just pulled the curtain back. And yeah, what was behind it was ugly. But at least it was real. That conversation with Angela stirred something in me, not in a romantic way, not at all, but in a way that reminded me there were still people out there who could be honest, who would tell the truth even if it wasn't pretty. People who could look at things without a filter. That was something I'd been missing, not just in my relationship with Mallory, but in general. Somewhere along the way, I stopped surrounding myself with people who kept me grounded. I think that's part of why I held on to Mallory for so long. She lived in a fantasy, and I let myself be pulled into it. It was easier than facing the quiet parts of life, aging parents, growing older, feeling like everyone else had somehow built something stable while I was still building sandcastles. I started reaching out to old friends. Some of them had drifted during the Mallory months, people I used to talk to every week, people who quietly stopped inviting me places. It was subtle, and at the time I chalked it up to busy lives, distance, different paths. But now I saw it clearly: I had disappeared. Not physically, but mentally. I had let someone else become the center of my world. I sent texts. Just simple messages: "Hey, I know I fell off the radar, but I'd love to catch up." A few didn't respond. Most did. I met one of my closest friends, Jarrett, for lunch at this tiny diner on the east side we used to go to when we were in our 20s. He looked at me after we ordered and said, "You look better." "Better than what?" I asked. "Better than that version of you from last year." He didn't need to explain. I knew exactly what he meant. About a month after Mallory left, I finally logged into her old Instagram account, well, not hers, but the one I helped her set up for her brand. She had asked me to manage the tech side when we were together. Set up the domain, connect it to the analytics, help write captions that sounded effortless but still personal. I never deleted my admin access. I didn't want to stalk her or sabotage anything. Honestly, I don't even know why I checked it that day. Maybe I was curious. Maybe I wanted to see what she was saying to her audience. What version of the story she was telling. There were new posts. Filtered, curated, styled. Her in a pale pink blazer, sipping a matcha latte, looking thoughtful near some forestic wood background. The caption read, "Sometimes growth means leaving behind what no longer serves you. Grateful for the lessons, even when they hurt." I read it 3 times. Then I laughed. It wasn't even anger anymore. It was like watching someone else play dress up in your old clothes, nothing about it fit. It wasn't about me. It was about her image. Her feed. Her next partnership or discount code. I logged out. For good this time. The seasons started shifting in Milwaukee, slowly, as they always do. The bitter cold of January gave way to the slush of February, then the hesitance of March. It was a weird time of year, when you weren't sure if you needed your winter coat or just a hoodie. The days got longer. I opened the blinds more often. I even started sleeping with the window cracked, just a little. And sometime around mid-March, I realized I hadn't thought about Mallory in a few days. Not in the way I used to, at least. She was still there, like a shadow at the edge of memory, but not taking up space anymore. Not the first thought in the morning. Not the weight on my chest at night. I was starting to breathe again. Grief, of course, was still there. That didn't fade. But it changed shape. It went from sharp, sudden stabs to something gentler. A tug. A whisper. A feeling in my chest when I passed a bakery that smelled like cinnamon, or when a certain song played on the radio. My sister sent me a voice memo one morning. Just her humming the tune our mom used to whistle when she cooked, something old and jazzy that none of us ever figured out the name of. I played it on loop while I cleaned the apartment. By April, I had cleared out the last of Mallory's things. She never came back for the box. I ended up donating most of it. I kept one thing, an old planner she'd left behind, mostly blank except for a few pages in January, where she had written things like grow brand identity, outsource tasks to Travis, and target higher income male demos for future collabs. That one hit me in the stomach. It was there in black and white. Not even coded. Not buried under layers of Instagram gloss. Just a clear, calculated list. I closed the planner, sat with it for a moment, then slid it into a manila envelope and filed it away with old tax documents. I didn't throw it out. I didn't need to keep it either. But it felt like it belonged in a folder, not in my memory. The first week of May arrived, and with it came the kind of sunshine that makes even Milwaukee feel like a new city. One of those weekends where everyone suddenly decides to be outside, farmers markets, joggers, couples walking dogs. The lake sparkled in that overexposed way that makes you squint, and I realized I hadn't felt truly present in months. Angela invited me to a small gathering at her condo. Nothing major, just a spring get-together, a mix of friends and work acquaintances. Low stakes, she promised. Come have a beer and breathe around people who don't SCK. I hesitated, but she'd earned my trust, and I was starting to remember what it felt like to enjoy people again. So I went. What I didn't expect was to walk into her living room and see Mallory, perched on the arm of a couch, laughing loudly at something someone was saying, perfectly framed by the golden hour sunlight like some walking Pinterest board. My stomach tightened, but I didn't leave. She saw me about 10 seconds after I arrived. Her smile didn't even flicker. She waved like nothing had happened between us. Like we were still co-stars in whatever version of her life she was curating now. I said hi, kept it civil. Angela gave me a quick side glance that said, I had no idea she was coming, and I believed her. Apparently one of Angela's friends had brought her along. Small world, Mallory said brightly. It wasn't rage I felt. Not even resentment. What hit me was something simpler, curiosity. She tried small talk, but I kept it polite and short. I noticed she mentioned her brand less now, and when she did, it was vague, like she was still figuring it out. When someone asked if she was still doing influencer stuff, she said, I'm pivoting to something more holistic. Whatever that meant. Then came the moment. One of the guys at the party, Jason, a friend of Angela's from work, was standing nearby, holding a drink, clearly intrigued by Mallory. I recognized the signs instantly. He had that interesting look. Mallory, of course, leaned in, engaging him, touching his arm while laughing. She hadn't changed a bit. And so, I did something petty. Petty, but clean. Satisfying. Honest. I waited for the moment when the group was chatting casually, and someone asked Jason what he did. He mentioned he was in real estate development, well-dressed, obviously successful. Mallory's ears perked up. I casually joined the circle, smiled at Jason, and said, Oh, you work in real estate? Mallory used to talk about dating a guy in your field. Said she loved being with someone who could fund her business ventures. Wonder if that was me or the guy before me. I smiled, friendly and casual, and added, she's got a great talent for pitching ideas. Especially ones that cost other people money. Mallory froze for a beat, just long enough to register the sting behind my voice. She gave me a tight smile. Jason raised an eyebrow. Oh, he said slowly. Interesting. Someone chuckled awkwardly. Angela, hiding behind her drink, choked a little trying not to laugh. Mallory recovered quickly, trying to steer the conversation back to neutral territory, but the vibe had shifted. The effortless charm? It flickered. The way Jason looked at her changed. Not mean, just more measured. Like he'd pulled back a layer and wasn't sure he liked what he saw. I didn't linger long. I mingled a bit, had my beer, and thanked Angela before leaving. But as I stepped out into the warm evening air, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not because I'd humiliated her. That wasn't the point. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't exposed some grand secret. I'd just told the truth. Let her own history speak for itself. And that was enough. The next morning, I had a message from Mallory. Really classy, Travis. Can't believe you'd bring up personal stuff like that just to make yourself feel better. I actually liked that guy. I didn't reply. That message was her last word in my life. That summer, I took a solo trip to La Crosse. Just me, the highway, and a box of my mom's old cassette tapes she used to play in the kitchen. I visited her grave, sat in the grass, and finally gave her the brooch. I pinned it to the bouquet I brought. Said everything I needed to say. Then I got in the car and drove home, not to escape something, but to move forward. Finally, it's been over a year since everything happened. The apartment's different now. Same walls, same windows, but the space feels more mine than it ever did before. I've painted. Replaced the curtains Mallory insisted were on brand with ones that actually block sunlight. The couch is new too, used, from a local shop, but comfortable in the way only something broken in by strangers can be. There are fewer things, but everything left has meaning. I got a dog. A beagle mix from a rescue shelter. His name is Benny. He snores louder than I do and sheds like he's trying to cover the world in fur, but he's been good for me. Give me a reason to get up, walk, and go outside. He doesn't care what I do for a living or how much money I make. He just wants to sit beside me while I read or sleep under my desk while I work. I've also started volunteering on weekends at a local community center. Just small stuff, helping with tech setups, organizing events, fixing old donated computers. It keeps me grounded. Reminds me that not everything has to be about getting ahead or performing. Sometimes, being useful is enough. My relationship with my sister has gotten stronger too. We talk more regularly now, and last Christmas, she came to Milwaukee. We made our mom's recipes together, listened to the same old jazz records, and lit a candle in her memory. There were no big speeches, no dramatic grief spirals. Just love. Quiet, warm, real. And Angela? We're still friends. Good ones. She's dating someone now, a kind, low-key guy who loves board games and lets her talk through her day without checking his phone once. We've laughed a lot about that party. She still calls it the softest takedown in party history. As for Mallory, I don't know what happened to her, and I don't need to. Occasionally I'll hear her name pop up in a conversation, usually tied to someone else's vague story about a partnership gone weird or a project that fizzled out before it started. But it no longer stings. I don't regret calling her out. I don't regret walking away. I regret what I missed, yes, but not the decision I made after. Not the peace I fought for. Not the truth I let rise to the surface. Life is quieter now. Less dramatic. But it feels like mine again. And sometimes, that's the best kind of revenge, healing. Fully. Authentically. Without needing them to see it.